Many people will believe that I have Melbourne too low on the ladder, with many betting on the D's to possibly be vying for a top 4 spot, but I don't know. I feel that the team is a little overrated, to be honest.
Well, that was fucking dreadful.
Although the grand final will not be at the MCG for another year, it will at least be run on schedule this time around, as Melbourne take on the Western Bulldogs at Optus Stadium in what will be the second ever meeting in a grand final. You will have to go all the way back to 1954 to the last time these two faced off on the biggest stage. In that grand final 67 years ago on the 25th of September, it would be Footscray, led by Charlie Sutton and Wally Donald, who would go on to win in a rather comfortable game for the Dogs by 51 points. This grand final will also be played on the 25th of September, funnily enough. Let's first talk about how Melbourne got here, and geez, they really made me look like a fool. I gotta give them all the kudos. I didn't think they had this in them, but they have been the best team in the regular season, capped off with their first minor premiership for 57 years, and have brought that same energy into the final series, with convincing victories against the Lions, and then most recently against the Cats, securing their first grand final appearance in 21 years. Now to the journey that Western Bulldogs have taken to get here, and as I predicted earlier in the year, the Dogs did finish 5th on the ladder, but I was not expecting them to make the granny, particularly after the late season fade out. Otherwise, there is for sure an argument to be made that they were perhaps leaps and bounds ahead of the rest with a superior percentage after round 20. But even with the fade out, they recovered splendidly and did so in heroic circumstances. Consecutive victories against the Bombers, Lions in a heart stopper, and a thrashing out of the Power booked the Dogs a ticket to the big dance. These two teams have already played one another twice this season. The first game on round 11 was won by Melbourne by 28 points, where although they looked like they won well, were hugely aided by the inefficiency of the Bulldogs inside 50s at only 34.6% compared to the season average of about 50%. Melbourne were also able to get on top with the contested ball, helped massively with 17 contested possessions by Christian Petrarca, easily a game high for the night. Western Bulldogs were sure to get their revenge in round 19 as they came out 20-point winners where Marcus Bontempelli and Jack McRae combined for 69 touches and 18 clearances. Notably, both teams were well below their average disposal efficiency percentages for the game, particularly for Melbourne, and both teams will need to try and avoid this if they are to walk away at the end of the night with the premiership. There are going to be some great battles all over the field. A big question, of course, is whether Stephen May will be fully fit for the game, and while he does probably get selected to play, we'll see if he can play the full match. I expect him to initially go up against Darren Norton, but as Norton loves to get up the field and lead into anything, May will likely need some help from Harrison Petty or even Jake Lever at certain stages. If May's hammy does go, then Norton is a possibility for a bag of goals. Western Bulldogs of course have their injury concerns too, with both Alex Keefe and Cody Waitman looking to recover from the problems, but they do look like they will both be good to go for Saturday. I think Alex Keefe in particular will be a big in, and has probably been the best key defender in the competition in the last 2 months, keeping many legitimate forwards well contained. I expect Max Gawn to play at least a good portion of the game in the forward line, and it will be an intriguing matchup between him and Keefe, and it could be one of the most important matchups for both teams in this game. Speaking of Max Gawn, and it is obvious that the Ds will have a huge advantage in the ruck. While Stefan Martin is a more solid option here than Team English, both will likely need to alternate against the machine that is Max Gawn, but with this likely to be Martin's last game, he will be sure to leave everything on the field for his swan song. If Gawn is again on fire from the forward line, then we could see Luke Jackson step up like he did last week and contest for a good period of time, freeing up Gawn to spend more time up forward. Team English will still be a handy player though in the forward line, where Melbourne defenders will have their hands full to try and stop all of his 207cm. Ben Brown could cause problems too, particularly for Zane Cordy, and Ryan Gardner should either not get axed. If needed, you could throw Josh Shackey down in the backline as well if it's desperately needed. Although not directly playing on one another, but I think whoever has the better game out of Cody Waitman and Keziah Pickett will have a big say on the match, as these two players in my view can give their respective teams that little bit of X factor which could make all the difference in the end. Both are very exciting players to watch, and it will be intriguing to see who can have the better game. And how can I forget the midfield matchup? Probably the best two midfield groups in the competition, and they will be facing one another. Great matchups all around in this one, including your two elite stars in Bontempelli and Petrarca, who both need to stand up if their team is to be successful. No questions asked. Ball magnets in Clayton Oliver and Jack McRae will be massive for the teams as well, and whoever controls the contested ball and clearances stats will likely win the match. I suspect that even with Gawn at the rack, the Bulldogs midfield will have an advantage from stoppages, seeing that they lead the comp in clearances, but Gawn's influence should be able to limit this, or at least lessen the gap. The Demons' pressure is immense too, and it could be another balancer here. You can be sure as well for mids like Jack Viney and James Harms to apply massive tackling pressure all over the field. The bookies had the Demons as favourites, but the Doggies love to be the outsiders, and if anything, this could perfectly suit them as they look to inflict more misery on the Demons. As for the Norm Smith, and as expected, all your top tier mids are amongst the favourites, like Petrarca, Oliver, Bontempelli and McRae, with Gawn up there as well. Both teams will be feeling that this is the moment, and the stars are aligning for both teams, particularly for the Dogs, where this is feeling a lot like their 2016 run, and according to the Salty Bulldog podcast, they have noticed that just like in 2016, they will be playing the minor premier in the final, and just like 5th place Adelaide did in 1998, both demolished the 2nd place team in the prelim to reach a final. The Crows, of course, went on to become premiers. But in saying that, the Dogs have had to travel to Tassie, Brisbane and Adelaide in this final series, and you wonder if all the travel could get to them, even with the extra week's break. I wonder if this could become a factor late in the game. And just before I continue, check out the Salty Bulldog, a brilliant podcast ran by my two good friends in Nick and Matt. Honestly, two of the most passionate AFL and Doggies fans out there. I've left links to the platforms below. This grand final is very hard to pick, and although it is definitely one of the more romantic finals matchups that we've had in recent history, ultimately, I think the Melbourne boys will close this one out and break their over half-century long premiership drought with a 9-point win. As much as it would be a true underdog story for the Dogs to triumph, I just think Melbourne might have that edge, as the team will be a little bit more fresh in my opinion. To the Norm Smith medal, and since I predict a Melbourne win, it only makes sense for me to pick a Melbourne player, doesn't it? So with that said, I think Max Gawn's dominance in the ruck will be one of the major reasons why the Demons win, and I will give him the nod for the medal. Regardless of the result, I think this is going to be one of the better grand finals we've had in recent years, and as someone who will be a neutral supporter, I hope both teams give us an instant classic. Time to hear your predictions. Let me know what you think will happen in the final. Who do you think will win it? And who do you think will be best on ground?